Okay, so I want you to do something for me right now. Just stop whatever you're doing. Put down
Okay.
the coffee, pause the treadmill, whatever it is. Look at your phone and just look at the date.
Right. It is Saturday, February 28th, 2026.
Exactly. A date that, well, depending on how the next 24 hours go, it might end up being bolded in every history textbook written for the next century.
Without a doubt. I mean, if you have turned on a TV, checked your feed, or God forbid, if you are actually living in Dubai, Manama, or Tehran right now, you know that the world has fundamentally shifted on its axis overnight.
Yeah, we are not talking about like tensions rising anymore. We aren't talking about heated diplomatic cables or new sanctions packages.
No, we are way past that. The diplomatic phase is completely over.
We are talking about kinetic action. Major, coordinated, high-intensity military strikes have commenced between the United States, Israel, and Iran. The Cold War in the Middle East just went hot, extremely hot, and it happened so fast.
It really is the scenario that every think tank from DC to Tel Aviv has been gaming out for, what, 20 years? And now we are watching it play out in real time. The fog of war is incredibly dense right now. But we have these crazy reports of the USS Ford entering something called ghost mode, explosions rocking the financial districts of the UAE, and the Iranian capital just being in a state of absolute frenetic bedlam.
It is chaos out there, absolute chaos.
Mhm.
But usually when we do these deep dives, we are looking at the reporting of the chaos, right? We analyze the CNN clips or the BBC articles. But today we are doing something totally different. We found a document, a blog post actually, that dropped right in the middle of this firestorm.
Yeah, and the timing is just wild.
It really is. It's titled Barackface, A Strategic Path to Iranian Freedom, Navigating the Strikes and Beyond.
And the author is, well, he's unexpected, to say the least.
Right. His name is Paramendra Kumar Bhagat, and he identifies himself right in the text as Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City. So you have this deep blue Democratic activist lineage, a guy who literally knocked on doors for hope and change.
But here he is, writing about a massive military campaign that is being launched ostensibly under a Trump presidency in 2026.
It is a fascinating collision of political worlds. You have an Obama-era idealist proposing a strategy for a Trump-era conflict. And the strategy itself, it is not what you would expect at all. It isn't, bomb them to the Stone Age, and it isn't peace at any cost. It's something else entirely.
It is incredibly specific. It reads almost like a surgical manual on how to turn this specific violence into a specific outcome, which is a free, democratic Iran.
And here's the kicker that made me literally stop reading and just stare at the wall for a solid minute. His vision of a free Iran isn't a Western puppet state. He actually argues for a democracy that still buys weapons from Russia and sells oil to China.
That really is the big aha moment of this entire piece. It challenges pretty much every assumption we have ever had about regime change. Usually the assumption is we win, we install our guys, they buy our jets, case closed.
But this source says no, that is exactly how you fail.
We are definitely going to get deep into that because it's a mind bender. But first, we really have to ground ourselves in the now. We need to step into the situation room of today, February 28th, 2026.
Yeah, let's look at the map based on the embedded tickers and the news clips included in this source, because it feels like the entire region is just lighting up all at once.
If you piece together the fragments, like the Dark Finance report, the India Today tickers, the social media blasts, it looks like a coordinated decapitation strike initiated by the U.S. and Israel. And the headline grabber, the thing that military tech nerds are going to be obsessing over for decades, is the USS Ford.
Ghost mode. I mean, that phrase alone just sounds absolutely terrifying.
It really does. The report from Dark Finance explicitly states the USS Ford has gone ghost mode. Now, in naval terms, coupled with the author's background in tech and AI, which we'll get to later, this implies a level of electronic warfare masking we just haven't seen before.
So it's not just like turning off the radios and maintaining radio silence.
No, we are likely talking about active signal cancellation, making a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier literally disappear from enemy radar and sensors while it is actively launching planes. It suggests the entire carrier group is operating in a way that blinds Iranian radar completely.
Invisibility. I mean, that is a massive, unprecedented advantage.
It's total electronic invisibility. And they aren't going in alone. The report mentions 60 F-35s. That is a massive force package. A standard carrier wing doesn't usually launch that many fifth-generation fighters at once, unless the objective is total, immediate air dominance.
Right. You don't launch 60 stealth jets just to send a warning shot.
Exactly. You
Right.
launch 60 jets to end the fight before the other guy can even put his boots on.
And they are clearly using that dominance. Ryan Saavedra is reporting, and this is unconfirmed, but it's very widespread in the source material we are looking at, that the office of the Supreme Leader of Iran has been blown up.
The Beat Rabari, that is the absolute nerve center of the entire country.
We aren't talking about some isolated military base out in the desert or a nuclear facility hidden inside a mountain. We're talking about the administrative heart of the theocracy right in downtown Tehran.
It is a massive message. It signals that the target isn't just the nuclear program or the missile silos this time. The target is the regime itself. It's a literal decapitation strike.
Yeah.
By hitting the Supreme Leader's office, the U.S. and Israel are signaling that the era of the Islamic Republic itself is the target. They are trying to sever the head of the snake.
But the source makes it very clear, this isn't a video game where you hit the boss and the level just magically ends. The snake strikes back, and Iran is hitting back incredibly hard.
Ferociously. And this is exactly where the fog of war gets so scary for everyone else living in that region.
I am looking at the Republic World ticker here in the source. It says, Iranian attack on U.S. Navy base in Bahrain Al Jufair. That is the home of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. That is direct state-on-state conflict. That isn't a proxy war in Yemen or Syria anymore.
No, not at all. If Iran is striking Al Jufair, they are actively trying to cripple the U.S. naval support capabilities in the Gulf. But it spills over to the civilians, too. This is the part that makes the global economic markets just tremble. There is a report of a huge explosion in Dubai.
Right near the Burj Khalifa.
The tallest building in the world. It is the ultimate symbol of modern prosperity in the Middle East. If missiles are landing there, the psychological safety of the entire Gulf region is just completely shattered. Think about the expats, the tourists, the global businesses headquartered right there in Dubai.
It is terrifying for you if you are a tourist in the Dubai Mall, just shopping for luxury brands, and suddenly the war is shaking the windows. That psychological impact is totally incalculable. And then you have Israel. The Times of India ticker is using some very aggressive language here. They say Iranian missiles are smashing the Iron Dome.
Smashing is a very strong word. It implies a total failure of the system. Forbes, on the other hand, is reporting successful interceptions over Jerusalem. And this is the classic duality of early war reporting. One side says the shield is broken, the other says the shield held.
The reality is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like the volume of fire is just so high that the system gets overwhelmed and some things are inevitably getting through.
Precisely. So the sky is full of missiles everywhere, from Jerusalem to Dubai. But what about the streets?
This is where the source gives us these two conflicting images of Tehran that I find really, really haunting. On one hand, the New York Post says, traffic, confusion, pack the streets. And I can just visualize that, the total gridlock, the panic, people just trying to get their families out of the blast zones.
It's the raw human cost of this. Ordinary people just caught in the crossfire.
But then, juxtaposed right next to it, you have that report from Ryan Saavedra claiming Iranians can actually be heard cheering the strike on the Supreme Leader's office.
That is the friction, right there in one image. You are terrified for your life, the ground is literally shaking beneath you, but you are cheering because the ultimate symbol of your oppression is burning down.
It is just unbelievable to try and picture that mindset.
But it speaks to the massive pent-up pressure in Iranian society. Remember, this is a population that has protested in 2009, 2017, 2019, 2022. Each time they were brutally crushed. The source argues that this war, terrifying as it is, might be viewed by the locals not as a foreign invasion, but as an opportunity, a final, desperate chance to break the deadlock.
Which brings us to the core of Paraminder's entire argument. The blog post is called Barackface. It's sort of a cheeky title referencing his past, but the subtitle is dead serious. A strategic path to Iranian freedom. He acknowledges the strikes are happening. He isn't saying stop the war. He is saying navigate the war.
Precisely. His whole thesis is precision over chaos. He argues that the U.S. and Israel shouldn't aim for outright conquest. We shouldn't be trying to occupy Tehran with tanks and Marines. The goal is to create conditions ripe for internal transformation.
Okay, so let's unpack this for a second. How do you actually do that? How do you drop bombs in a way that creates a democracy? Because usually when you drop bombs, you just create a lot of rubble and a whole lot of resentment.
You have to be incredibly, almost surgically selective about who and what you hit. And this leads to what I like to call the Khamenei doctrine in the text. The author suggests that the optimal move regarding the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is not necessarily to kill him.
Wait, hold on a second. We just spent 5 minutes talking about how they blew up his office.
They blew up the office, yes, the physical infrastructure. But the strategy suggests that if he survived the blast, or if he is hiding in a bunker somewhere, you leave him there. You keep him alive, but profoundly isolated.
Why would you do that? If you have a clean shot of the top guy, don't you take it? Isn't that the ultimate victory in a decapitation strike?
You have to think about the optics and the deep psychology of the region. If you kill him, especially with an American missile, you risk making him a martyr. You accidentally validate his entire life's narrative that the U.S. is the great Satan coming to destroy Islam. He dies a hero to his die-hard followers.
He becomes a symbol, a legend that outlives the war.
Exactly. He becomes a fallen hero who died fighting off the imperialist invaders. But if you isolate him, if you cut his comms, jam his broadcasts, and basically leave him shouting orders into a disconnected phone while his regime collapses around him, he looks incredibly weak. He looks irrelevant.
The source literally calls it being profoundly isolated.
Because an isolated dictator is a powerless dictator. Without the ability to actually command the machinery of the state, he's just an old man sitting in a basement. That image destroys the mystique of the regime far more effectively than a Hellfire missile ever could. You want him to watch his empire crumble, totally unable to stop it. That is the ultimate humiliating defeat.
So you neutralize the head by muting him, by making him a ghost in his own country. What about the arms, though? The people actually holding the guns on the streets?
This is the second major pillar of the strategy, the enforcers. The source is very specific here. You do not target the regular Iranian army, which is called the Artesh. You strictly target the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the Basij.
For our listeners who might not be experts on the exact Iranian military structure, can you break that down? Why target the Basij and not the army? Aren't they all just fighting for Iran?
It is a really crucial distinction to make. The Artesh is the traditional national military. They defend the geographical borders, they are conscripts. Many of them are just regular guys serving their mandatory time. They view themselves as defenders of the nation of Iran, not necessarily defenders of the cleric in charge.
Okay, so they are the patriots, the guys who just want to protect their homeland.
Right. But the IRGC and the Basij, they are the ideological guardians of the revolution. The Basij are the paramilitaries you see on motorbikes who beat protesters with batons. They are the ones who violently enforce the strict hijab laws. They are basically the regime's immune system against its own people. They are the ones who enacted the brutal crackdowns in 2022.
So the strategy being laid out here is leave the national army totally alone because you might actually need them later to keep order, but absolutely hammer the guys on the motorbikes.
Exactly. The source calls them the linchpin of repression. If you completely incapacitate the IRGC's ability to communicate and deploy, you effectively clear the streets. The source paints this really vivid picture. It says when peaceful protesters inevitably flood the streets, these forces must be incapacitated.
So you're essentially acting as close air support for a civilian revolution. You remove the physical obstacle that has violently stopped the people every single other time they tried to rise up.
That is the theory in a nutshell. You break that barrier between the will of the people and the palace. You make it physically safe for the average citizen to go outside and protest.
But here is where it gets really politically messy, because the source is very firm on who gets to decide what happens next. And considering this is allegedly happening under Trump, the author has a very, very strong warning.
He really does. He explicitly warns against any external meddling in the political outcome. He says flat out that figures like Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu have no role in dictating Tehran's future.
Which seems, frankly, very difficult to imagine. I mean, if you were the U.S. president and you just spent billions of dollars and risked American lives to topple a hostile regime, the natural instinct is to pick the next guy. You want your guy sitting in Tehran.
Historically, that is exactly what the U.S. does. We did it in 1953 with the Shah. We tried it in Iraq. And the author is explicitly saying, do not do it again. He invokes the millennia-spanning history of the Persian Empire. He is reminding the reader that Iran isn't some new artificial nation drawn on a map by a British diplomat. It's a deep, ancient civilization. They absolutely know how to govern themselves.
So the message to Washington is basically, go ahead and break the door down, but do not try to rearrange the furniture inside.
It is entirely a matter of political legitimacy. If the new leader is flown in on a CIA jet, he is totally dead on arrival politically. He will just be seen as a Western puppet. But if he rises organically from the streets of Tehran, he has a true mandate. he actually has the people's trust.
We see this exact sentiment in the embedded tweets in the source, too. Sean McGuire, one of the voices the source highlights, writes a message directly to the Iranian people. He says, "This war is not aimed at you. It's aimed at the tyrannical regime. We love you."
That kind of direct messaging is critical for shaping the narrative on the ground.
And then Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, is online calling the strikes a humanitarian intervention.
That is a very heavy phrase to use, humanitarian intervention.
Yeah, can you really call a bombing campaign involving 60 stealth fighters humanitarian? It feels like a massive oxymoron.
That is the central moral tension of this whole deep dive, isn't it? If you truly believe the regime is holding 80 million people hostage, torturing dissidents, suppressing women, completely wrecking the economy, then taking out the hostage taker is, in that specific worldview, a humanitarian act, even if it requires extreme violence to achieve.
It brings up the classic just war theory.
Precisely. But as we saw with the Dubai and Bahrain news tickers, war is always incredibly messy. Civilians inevitably get hurt. The idea of a perfectly surgical strike is a myth. There is always collateral damage. So calling it humanitarian is a very deliberate political choice by Pahlavi to justify the extreme means.
And clearly, not everyone in the U.S. is on board with this framing. We have an MSNOW headline over in the sidebar of the blog post. It features a Democratic senator raising serious concerns, saying, "This is not how a democracy goes to war."
Which brings us right back to the author, Paramendra, because remember, he is an Obama guy. He should theoretically be aligning with that exact Democratic senator. He should be the one calling for immediate de-escalation. But instead, he is tweeting directly at Donald Trump saying, "With this, you achieve Reagan status."
Reagan status. Let's unpack that for a minute. That is a massive ego stroke to direct at Donald Trump.
Oh, it absolutely is. But it's also a highly strategic historical comparison. Reagan is lionized by the political world, not just because he was a conservative icon, but because he presided over the fall of the Soviet Union. He essentially won the Cold War without starting World War III, arguably.
So he is telling Trump he could be the Reagan of the Middle East.
Paramendra is essentially whispering in Trump's ear, saying, if you do this right, if you empower the people, instead of invading with ground troops, you can be the guy who officially ended the Islamic Republic. You can change the map of the Middle East forever. He is deliberately appealing to the president's desire for a massive historical legacy to drive a humanitarian outcome.
It is brilliant, really. It's realpolitik delivered via Twitter.
It's incredibly shrewd. He isn't out there saying war is bad. He is saying win the war the right way and you become an absolute legend. He is trying to steer the tank by complimenting the driver, essentially.
Okay, so let's play this out. Let's say Trump listens to this advice. Let's say the strikes work perfectly. The IRGC is crushed, Khamenei is isolated in his bunker, and the Iranian people rise up and take the streets. What happens the next day? This is the part of the source that I keep coming back to. The big aha moment that really surprised me.
Right, the vision of the future Iran.
Because usually, the classic Western fantasy of regime change ends with a totally pro-American government that, opens a McDonald's in downtown Tehran and signs a peace treaty with Israel on day one.
The client-state model. That is the default DC dream scenario.
But Paramendra proposes something totally different here. He describes a democratic Iran that still buys weapons from Russia.
And still sells its oil to China.
I need you to explain that to me. Why would a free Iran, liberated essentially by American air power, turn around and give their money to Putin? It feels totally backwards.
I know it sounds completely contradictory at first glance, but it's actually a brilliant piece of geopolitical stabilization. You have to think about it as a non-zero-sum game.
Okay, walk me through that logic.
Imagine the new Iranian government is 100% pro-American. Who gets terrified immediately? Russia and China. They lose a major strategic partner in the region, they lose a huge customer for their weapons, and a vital supplier for their energy needs. So what do they instinctively do? They will do everything in their power to destabilize that new government. They will fund local insurgents, they will launch crippling cyber attacks, they will try to strangle the new economy.
Right, they simply won't let a massive U.S. puppet sit on their southern border without putting up a huge fight.
Exactly. But if the new Iran steps up and says, hey, wait a minute, we are a democracy now. We are totally free, but we are neutral. We will still buy your S-400 missiles, Russia. We will still sell you our oil, China. In fact, we will sell you even more oil because the Western sanctions will finally be gone.
Oh, wow. Then Russia and China suddenly have absolutely no reason to fight the regime change.
Correct. You completely remove the incentive for the other superpowers to destroy the fragile new democracy. You integrate Iran into the global economy, but on its own terms. The source calls it a reformed Iran doing business with everyone.
It is a vision of Iran as this massive neutral powerhouse,
Hmm.
sort of like a Switzerland in the Middle East, but with massive oil reserves and 85 million highly educated people.
It is entirely about survival. If you are a new, fragile democracy trying to stand on your own 2 feet, you simply cannot afford to have China and Russia actively working as your enemies. You desperately need them as stable trading partners.
And practically speaking, the source makes another key point about the physical military assets during these strikes. He argues very strongly that we shouldn't destroy the Iranian army's actual stockpiles.
Because the new guys taking over will need them.
Yes, exactly. If you just bomb and destroy every single tank and missile silo in the country, the new democratic government starts with absolutely zero defense. They become totally vulnerable to invasion by their neighbors or to internal warlords rising up. The source compares it to the Libya scenario.
And that is the absolute nightmare scenario for everyone involved.
Right. Look at Libya. We toppled Gaddafi, the national army dissolved overnight, and the whole country just turned into an open-air arms market for terrorists. The source is terrified of that happening in Iran. He says, essentially, destroy the political control, which is the IRGC, but save the hardware. A strong democracy still needs a strong army to protect itself. And if that army happens to use Russian tanks, so be it.
That is just such a mature, highly nuanced take. It moves completely away from that childish, you are either with us or against us mentality that dominated the early 2000s. It says you can be free and still have your own independent foreign policy.
It has a bridge nation concept, bridging the East and the West.
But implementing this requires a level of military precision that is honestly mind-boggling to think about. You have to know exactly which building houses the besieged commander and which warehouse holds the spare tank parts you want to save for the new government. You have to aggressively hit the software of the regime, but perfectly save the hardware.
And that brings us right back to the technology being used. The source is absolutely drenched in high-tech references. We talked earlier about the USS Ford's ghost mode, but look at the sidebar of the blog post. There is a headline linked from Wired magazine that says, "Hacked prayer app sends surrender messages to Iranians."
That specific detail genuinely gave me chills when I read it.
I mean, just imagine that. You are a devout person going about your day. You open an app on your phone to perform your daily prayers, which is a deeply intimate, spiritual moment. And instead of the direction to Mecca, you get a push notification directly from the ether telling you the regime is falling and you should just give up and stay home.
It is psychological warfare adapted for the algorithmic age. It is incredibly intrusive, it is deeply personal, and it is probably terrifyingly effective. It completely bypasses the state-controlled media and speaks directly to the individual citizen in their most private moments. In the old days, psychological ops meant dropping paper leaflets from a cargo plane. Now, you push a targeted notification straight to a guy's pocket.
It totally fits with the author's broader background, though. If you look at his bio, he has written books with titles like Agentic AI and the Technologies Behind Agentic AI. He clearly views this entire conflict through a very specific lens of technological acceleration.
He really does. And there is this fascinating techno-religious undertone to his work, too. Did you happen to notice the other book titles listed in the sidebar of his blog?
Yeah, there were some wild ones. Kalkiism, the great cosmic prank, why Allah might just be.
And prophecies are proof of God. This is clearly not your standard dry Rand corporation analyst writing this strategy paper.
No, not at all. So what is Kalkiism?
Kalkiism refers to Kalki, the final avatar of the god Vishnu in Hinduism, who is prophesied to come at the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the current age of darkness and filth, to destroy the wicked and usher in a new age of truth and purity. The author seems to view the fall of this specific theocracy in Iran not just as a geopolitical necessity, but almost as a cosmic inevitability.
It adds this really intense layer of destiny to his tone. It reads like the missiles are flying, the AI is hacking the phones, the ancient prophecy is finally fulfilling itself. It makes the strategy feel less like a standard policy white paper and much more like a manifesto for a new era.
Or even a prophecy in itself. He literally says, the strikes of 2026 may be the catalyst. He views the chaos of the war as the painful birth pangs of a completely new world order. He sees the absolute convergence of high tech, like AI and robotics, with high spirituality.
Speaking of the new world, let's zoom out a bit, because while Tehran is literally burning in this scenario, the rest of the planet is still turning. And the sidebar news tickers in the source paint a really interesting picture of the broader global context happening on February 28th.
They do. It's a world that is clearly in massive transition.
We have a ticker that says India, Canada, all set to ink a 10-year deal on uranium supply.
That is a huge piece of news to drop on the same day. Think about the timing. The Middle East, the traditional oil hub of the world, is in absolute flames. Meanwhile, India, the world's largest democracy, is securing a decade's worth of nuclear fuel from a G7 nation. It heavily signals the global shift away from fossil fuel dependence.
It is like watching two completely different historical eras violently collide on the same day.
Exactly. And another ticker says Japan adopts new carbon reduction targets. It feels like the old world, the world defined by oil wars and religious crusades, is fighting its final, incredibly violent battle in the Persian Gulf, while the rest of the developed world is just quietly trying to build the new green energy architecture.
That is a really poignant observation. And the author's other book titles, like The Dawn Beyond Currency and Liquid Computing, they strongly suggest he believes we are rapidly moving toward a post-resource scarcity world. A world where fighting bloody wars over oil is just completely obsolete.
So in his framework, freeing Iran is actually a necessary prerequisite for humanity reaching that future.
In his view, absolutely yes. You cannot have a utopian Star Trek-style future if you still have medieval theocracies holding back 85 million people. He actually calls Iran the country of geniuses in one of his titles. He sees the Iranian population as this massive, untapped reservoir of human talent that is currently capped by the Ayatollahs.
And if you blow the cap off, that immense talent just flows into the global pool and accelerates everyone.
Exactly. It is a wildly optimistic view of what is fundamentally a very bloody reality on the ground today.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second here, because optimism doesn't stop shrapnel. We have real reports of traffic and confusion in Tehran right now. We have real people, families, stuck in gridlocked traffic jams while 60 F-35s fly overhead dropping munitions. What if this incredibly delicate strategy goes wrong? What if the Barackface strategy fails?
That is the ultimate risk, isn't it? The Libya risk. If you successfully decapitate the regime, but the interim government the source mentions doesn't form quickly enough, you just get total anarchy. You get heavily armed warlords fighting over the smoking ruins of Tehran.
The source does mention an interim government is poised to emerge, which implies there's been a lot of secret pre-planning going on behind the scenes.
It implies that people like Reza Pahlavi, Masih Alinejad, and other opposition leaders have been talking intensely, probably in neutral places like Doha or Geneva for months.
And we did see Al Jazeera reporting that Qatar's main priority today is de-escalation. Qatar is always positioning itself as the middleman in these regional crises.
Right. If there is a cohesive plan for the day after, it is probably sitting on a table in a hotel in Doha right now. If there isn't a solid plan, then we're looking at a rolling humanitarian catastrophe that will probably make the Syrian civil war look small by comparison.
That is the terrifying race against time we are watching. Can the surgical strikes work and the new government step up faster than the chaos and panic can spread through the streets?
Is the scalpel faster than the infection? That really is the defining question of the day.
I want to circle back to the ghost mode thing one more time because I honestly think it's the perfect metaphor for this entire deep dive we've done today. The U.S. military is there exerting massive force, but it's deliberately invisible. The hand is striking the blow, but the face is entirely hidden from the radar.
It aligns perfectly with the political strategy he outlines, too. Don't let Trump pick the winner. The U.S. military power should merely be the invisible enabler of change, not the highly visible occupying force.
Invisible enabler. That is a really powerful concept for modern geopolitics. It is the exact opposite of the old boots-on-the-ground mentality.
It is servers in the cloud and stealth in the air. It is a war fought by integrated systems and algorithms, not just young soldiers kicking down doors.
And according to that Wired ticker about the hacked apps, it is a war being fought directly in the minds of the people holding their smartphones.
We are quite literally watching the first true AI-assisted regime change operation in human history unfold today. The feedback loops for the military are faster, the targeting is infinitely faster, and the propaganda is hyper-personalized to the individual.
It is a brave new world we are stepping into, and frankly, a pretty terrifying one.
Indeed it is. Keep in mind, too, the source mentions the French president is actively discussing Trump, India, and Modi amidst all this. The diplomatic web is incredibly tangled. Everyone is trying to figure out where they stand in this new paradigm.
Because every major player knows that if Iran flips from a hostile theocracy to a neutral, booming democracy, the entire Eurasian power balance shifts overnight.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the events of February 28th, 2026, let's just look at the overall scorecard. We have the U.S. and Israel engaging in a massive, unprecedented high-tech strike against Iranian leadership. We have this counterintuitive strategy proposed by a former Obama volunteer being directed at a Trump White House. We have a vision of a future Iran that completely defies the standard Western puppet narrative. And we have a global community just holding its collective breath.
That sums it up perfectly. It is a moment of incredibly high peril, but also incredibly high possibility.
Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final provocative thought to mull over. The source strongly suggests that a victory for democracy in the Middle East doesn't automatically mean a victory for the West. It suggests that a truly free Iran might still choose to be a close friend and business partner to Russia and China. If that happens, if the bad guys are finally removed but the new good guys don't want to join our team, are we as Western observers and voters actually ready to accept that?
That is the million-dollar question for the next decade. Can Washington actually handle a thriving democracy that looks us in the eye and says no to us?
We might just have to learn how.
It is definitely something to chew on while you watch the news tickers roll across your screens today. Stay safe out there and stay informed. The history books for the next century are being written right now, and we are just reading the very first page together.
Keep watching the horizon, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will see you on the other side.